Watch your tone, Judge. I'm the one who signed the budget for this courthouse, so let's handle this like adults. Tell me the fine and I'll pay it. I've got a country club lunch to get to.
I have sat on this bench for over 3 decades. I have watched cold-blooded killers tremble during sentencing and drug lords cry for their mothers when the handcuffs clicked shut. But there is a category of criminal far more dangerous than all of them combined. It isn't the man holding a gun, it's the man holding a pen, signing administrative orders with the blind belief that he is God. That is the kind of man who walked into my courtroom on the morning of Tuesday, the 14th of November, 2023. His name was Marcus the King Sterling, the sitting mayor of Silver Creek, a wealthy enclave not far from here. And he didn't walk in like a defendant. He walked in like he was inspecting a piece of real estate he was planning to buy. Let me paint a picture of Marcus Sterling for you. 55 years old, wearing a bespoke Armani suit worth at least $7,000. His hair was slicked back, and a permanent smirk played on his lips, the smile of a man who hasn't heard the word no in his entire adult life. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the clerk. He was busy texting on the latest iPhone, completely ignoring the strict no electronics rule in my courtroom. The file on my desk read, Case number 2023CR9921, State versus Marcus Sterling. The initial charges sounded mild, disorderly conduct and violation of a restraining order. But do not let the dry legal language fool you. The reality of this case was devastating. The victim sat in the front row on the left. Her name was Sarah Miller, 29 years old, a young and incorruptible urban planner. Sarah was a single mother of 2, and she had committed an unforgivable sin in the eyes of Marcus Sterling. She had refused to sign off on his illegal shopping mall project, slated for a plot of land zoned as a park for disabled children. Sterling's retaliation wasn't immediate violence. It was far more sophisticated and cruel. He cut the power to her home in the middle of winter. He had men follow her when she picked up her children from school. He publicly smeared her reputation in the local press, labeling her incompetent and an obstacle to economic growth. Sarah sat there, her hands clasping her knees so tightly her knuckles were white, eyes swollen from sleepless nights. She was shaking not from the cold, but from the pure terror of facing the monster who had turned her life into a living hell. I banged the gavel. The sharp crack of wood on wood sliced through the murmurs in the room. Defendant Marcus Sterling, I said, my voice low and cold. Put the phone away and stand up when the court addresses you. Sterling didn't rush. He finished typing his text, smirked at his private attorney, a man named Arthur Blackwood, known in political circles as the Cleaner, and then slowly rose. But he didn't stand straight. He leaned against the defense table, a posture of absolute contempt. Your Honor, Attorney Blackwood spoke first, his voice smooth as oil. My client is a very busy man. He is running a city. We request a swift resolution to this minor misunderstanding so he can get back to serving the people. I looked straight at Sterling. I have seen that look 1,000 times. It is the look of unchecked power. He didn't view me as a judge. He viewed me as an annoying subordinate he needed to fire. In this courtroom, Mr. Sterling, I said, locking eyes with him, you are not the mayor. You are a defendant, and you will show respect, or I will teach you what respect means. Sterling laughed, a short, dismissive chuckle that echoed in the silent room. Judge Boyd, he said, his voice booming with fake authority. You should be careful with your tone. Do you know who signed the budget approval for this courthouse renovation last year? I did. You are sitting under a roof that I paid for. The entire courtroom held its breath. The bailiffs tightened their grip on their belts. Sarah Miller looked down, tears beginning to fall. He had just openly threatened me. He thought his money and title were a shield that protected him from justice. But he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He forgot a fundamental truth. Real power doesn't reside in a title. It resides in the truth. And I, Judge Boyd, was about to show him the naked truth. I slowly took off my glasses and placed them on the bench. I wasn't angry. Anger is an emotion for the weak. I felt a cold calm, the calm of a predator watching prey willingly step into a trap. You think you own this building, Mr. Sterling? I asked, my voice terrifyingly soft. Today, I am going to show you that you don't even own your own freedom. This was just the beginning. And Marcus Sterling had absolutely no idea that the countdown to his destruction had already begun to tick. Most men, when realizing they have just insulted a sitting judge, attempt to backpedal. They stammer apologies, they blame stress, they look at their shoes. Marcus Sterling did none of that. He adjusted his silk tie, leaned back against the defense table, and checked his watch again. He actually believed that by reminding me who signed the checks for the city budget, he had effectively ended the hearing. He thought he had bought my silence. He was about to learn that silence in my courtroom is not something you buy, it is something you fear. Mr. Prosecutor, I said, ignoring Sterling's posturing entirely, please proceed with the evidence regarding the violation of the no contact order. The prosecutor was David Chen, a sharp, no-nonsense litigator who had been building this case quietly for weeks. He stood up and placed a flash drive on the clerk's desk. Your Honor, Chen began, we are submitting Exhibit A. These are audio recordings recovered from Miss Miller's voicemail, dated October 24th, 3 days after the restraining order was issued. Sterling let out an audible sigh. Oh, come on, he interrupted, his voice booming over the prosecutor. It was a butt dial. I'm a busy man. My phone makes calls. Counsel, I warned Blackwood, Sterling's attorney, control your client. If he speaks out of turn again, I will have him gagged. And I am not speaking metaphorically, Blackwood whispered frantically into Sterling's ear. Sterling swatted him away but stayed silent, crossing his arms with a smirk that said, Go ahead, play your little tape. The clerk pressed play. The sound of Marcus Sterling's voice filled the room. It wasn't the polished, charismatic voice he used at press conferences. It was slurred, heavy with expensive scotch and unbridled rage. You think you can stop progress, Sarah? You think a piece of paper from some discount judge is going to keep me away? That land is mine. The mall is happening. And if you don't sign that permit by Friday, you're going to find out how cold this city can really get. I will bury you under so much litigation your grandchildren will be paying off the legal fees. Do the smart thing, girl. Know your place. The recording ended with a click. In the gallery, Sarah Miller was openly weeping, her hands covering her face. The cruelty in that voice was physical. You could feel it pressing against your chest. I looked at Sterling. I expected to see shame. I expected to see denial. Instead, I saw him shaking his head, looking at the ceiling as if he were the victim of a great inconvenience. Context, Judge, Sterling said, breaking the silence before his lawyer could stop him. That's just politics. It's rough and tumble. I was negotiating. That's how business gets done in the real world. You wouldn't understand. Negotiating? I repeated the word slowly. You call threatening to bury a single mother in litigation negotiating? You call ignoring a judicial order business? I call it leadership. Sterling shot back, straightening his jacket. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to build an omelet. Or in this case, a shopping center that will bring jobs to this city. I'm the hero here, Boyd, not her. He pointed a finger at Sarah, a finger adorned with a gold signet ring. She's holding back the future, he sneered. And you're helping her. Honestly, this whole charade is beneath me. How much is the fine? Let's just pay it so I can get to my lunch meeting at the country club. That was the tipping point. I have dealt with arrogance. I have dealt with narcissism. But this was something else. This was a man who had completely detached himself from the concept of accountability. He truly believed that the laws were merely suggestions for people in his tax bracket. He believed that because he held the title of mayor, he was the author of morality itself. I picked up the file on my desk. I closed it. The sound was soft, but in the dead silence of the room, it sounded like a gunshot. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. You seem to believe that you can write a check and walk out those doors to your lunch meeting. I leaned forward. You are mistaken. The audio recording I just heard is not politics. It is a confession. It is clear evidence of witness intimidation, a felony. And your behavior in this courtroom, your lack of remorse, your open contempt for the law, and your admission that you view these proceedings as a charade tells me everything I need to know about your character. Sterling's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. What are you talking about? I am talking about the fact that I am revoking your bail, I said. The air left the room. Revoking? Sterling laughed nervously. You can't do that. I'm the mayor. Not in here, I replied. In here, you are a danger to the community and a danger to the victim. Bail is revoked. You are remanded to custody immediately." I nodded to the bailiffs. Two officers stepped forward, reaching for their handcuffs. This was the moment reality crashed into Marcus Sterling's delusion. He looked at the officers, then at me, then at the exit. The realization hit him. He wasn't going to lunch. He was going to a cage. And that is when the animal inside the suit finally broke loose. Psychologists call it an extinction burst. It is the phenomenon where a behavior gets worse before it disappears completely. When a child throws a tantrum because they aren't getting candy, they scream louder just before they give up. When a narcissist realizes their manipulation has failed, they don't retreat, they explode. Marcus Sterling was having his extinction burst. When the bailiff, Officer Miller, reached for Sterling's left arm, the mayor didn't just pull away. He shoved the officer, a full, two-handed shove to the chest of a uniformed law enforcement agent. "Don't you touch me," Sterling screamed, his voice cracking. "Do you know who I am? I am the mayor of this city. I command you to stand down." The courtroom gasped. His attorney, Mr. Blackwood, stood up, looking horrified. "Marcus, stop, sit down." But Sterling wasn't listening to legal advice anymore. He was listening to the primal panic in his brain. He looked around the room, his eyes wild, searching for a way out. He looked at the exit, blocked by two more officers. He looked at Sarah Miller, who was shrinking into her seat in terror. And then he looked at me. In his mind, I was the source of this nightmare. I was the one stripping him of his armor. I was the one daring to tell the king that he had no clothes. "You," he snarled, pointing a shaking finger at the bench. "This is your fault. You think you can humiliate me? You think you can lock me up like a common criminal?" "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice steady, though my hand moved instinctively toward the panic button under my desk. "Step back." He didn't step back. He stepped forward. "I will ruin you," he yelled, saliva flying from his mouth. "I will burn this courthouse to the ground." And then he did the unthinkable. He didn't run for the door. He ran for me. It happened in a blur, but in my memory, it plays out in slow motion. Sterling kicked his heavy oak chair aside. He lunged over the defense table with the athleticism I didn't think he possessed. He was charging the bench, his eyes locked on my throat. His hands reached out, as if to strangle the judgment right out of me. "Get him," someone screamed. Sterling made it exactly 3 steps. He forgot about Officer Marcus Thompson. I've told you about Marcus before. He doesn't say much. He doesn't have to. He was standing to the right of the defense table, and he had been waiting for this moment since Sterling walked in. As Sterling launched himself toward the dais, Marcus didn't hesitate. He didn't reach for his taser. He didn't reach for his baton. He simply lowered his shoulder and met the mayor with the force of a freight train. The impact shook the floorboards. It wasn't a fight. It was physics. 250 pounds of trained muscle colliding with 180 pounds of delusional entitlement. Marcus hit him mid-stride, wrapping his arms around Sterling's waist and driving him into the carpet with a bone-jarring thud. 1 second, the mayor was airborne, screaming threats. The next second, he was face down on the floor. The wind knocked out of him so hard it sounded like a tire blowing out. "Stay down," Marcus roared, his knee pressing firmly into Sterling's lower back. "Get off me! Get off!" Sterling wheezed, thrashing his legs like a pinned insect. "I'll have your badge. I'll have your life." 2 other officers swarmed in immediately. They grabbed his arms. They grabbed his legs. Sterling was kicking, biting at the air, cursing in a language that would make a sailor blush. It took exactly 20 seconds. From the moment he lunged to the moment the steel cuffs clicked shut on his wrists, 20 seconds of chaos had dismantled 30 years of curated public image. Officer Thompson hauled him up. Sterling's expensive Armani suit was covered in dust. His tie was crooked. His lip was bleeding where it had hit the floor. The King of Silver Creek didn't look like royalty anymore. He looked like exactly what he was, a violent, desperate criminal who had just assaulted a court officer and attempted to attack a judge. The room was dead silent, save for Sterling's ragged breathing and the soft sobbing of Sarah Miller in the front row. I stood up. I looked down at him from the bench. He tried to meet my gaze, but the fire was gone. It had been replaced by shock. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't process that the physical world hadn't bent to his will. Marcus Sterling, I said, and my voice didn't tremble. You just turned a disorderly conduct charge into a felony assault on a judicial officer. You wanted to show us who you really are? Well, congratulations. We see you. I turned to the clerk. Add assault on a judge, resisting arrest, and assault on a law enforcement officer to the charges. And Officer Thompson? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus said, not even breathing hard. Get him out of my sight. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom slammed shut behind Marcus Sterling, but they couldn't cut off the sound of his screaming. It faded down the hallway, a pathetic trail of threats about firing people, suing the city, and calling the governor. But inside the courtroom, the silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a storm that had finally broken. Order, I said quietly. The room exhaled. But the real drama was no longer happening in front of me. It was happening downstairs, in the holding cells. I know those cells well. I inspect them twice a year. They are made of cinder block and painted a color that can only be described as despair gray. They smell of bleach, old sweat, and fear. There are no Italian leather chairs down there. There are no assistants to bring you espresso. There is just a steel bench bolted to the floor and a toilet with no seat. This was Marcus Sterling's new kingdom. According to the incident report filed by Officer Thompson later that afternoon, the transition from mayor to inmate height 842 was violent. Sterling didn't just walk into the cell. He had to be guided in, still thrashing, still shouting about his rights. I need my phone, he reportedly screamed. Get me my phone. I am going to call the police commissioner and have every single one of you stripped of your badges by sunset. But here is the beautiful brutality of the justice system. The cell doesn't care who you know. The steel bars are indifferent to your net worth. Arthur Blackwood, his attorney, was allowed down there 10 minutes later to try and calm him down. I can only imagine that conversation. Blackwood, the fixer, the man who made problems disappear for the elite, walking into a cage to talk to a client who had just committed felicide on his own career on live camera. Reports say Blackwood didn't stay long. He walked out of that holding area looking 5 years older. Why? Because you can fix a parking ticket. You can fix a zoning violation. You can even, with enough money, fix a disorderly conduct charge. But you cannot fix a physical assault on a judge witnessed by 50 people and recorded on HD security cameras. Back in the courtroom, I looked at Sarah Miller. She had stopped crying. She was looking at the empty defense table where her tormentor had stood just minutes before. For the first time in months, her shoulders dropped. The tension that had held her body hostage began to release. Miss Miller, I said gently. She looked up, startled. I am issuing a permanent restraining order, I told her, effective immediately. Mr. Sterling will not be going near you, your home, or your children. And, given the new charges, I think it is safe to say he will be a guest of the state for a very long time. She nodded, unable to speak. A young female deputy handed her a tissue. People often ask me if I enjoy these moments, if I get satisfaction from locking up powerful men. The answer is no. I don't feel joy. I feel relief. Relief that the system, for all its flaws, held firm. Relief that the line was drawn, but the day wasn't over. While Sterling was cooling off in the basement, realizing that his $7,000 suit was getting wrinkled on a concrete bench, something else was happening outside. The media had gotten wind of the mayor's meltdown. News vans were circling the courthouse like sharks sensing blood in the water. And inside that cell, the first crack in Sterling's delusion was starting to form. The adrenaline was fading. The pain from the takedown was setting in. The silence of the cell was pressing in on him. For the first time in his life, Marcus Sterling was alone. No sycophants, no yes men, just him and the consequences of his own ego. He sat on that cold steel bench, head in his hands, and realized that the check he tried to write with his mouth had just bounced. Hard. While Marcus Sterling sat in a 6x8 cell contemplating the ruin of his Italian suit, the world outside was moving at the speed of light. Bad news travels fast, but scandal involving a politician travels at the speed of the internet. By the time the bailiffs had finished processing Sterling's paperwork, the courthouse steps looked like the red carpet of a chaotic movie premiere. News vans from every major network were double parked on Main Street. Reporters were shouting into microphones, trying to be the first to break the story of the mayor's meltdown at 1 p.m. Sterling's press secretary, a sharp-edged woman named Elena Vance, attempted damage control. She stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by microphones, looking pale. She was good at her job. She had spun Sterling scandals before, but this was like trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. Mayor Sterling, she began, her voice trembling slightly, suffered a momentary medical episode due to extreme exhaustion and low blood sugar. His actions in the courtroom were not reflective of his character, but rather a symptom of a health crisis. We ask for privacy as he seeks medical attention. It was a brilliant lie. It was calculated to garner sympathy. It painted the violent thug I had just locked up as a victim of his own hard work. For about an hour, it almost worked. The narrative started to shift. Social media began to buzz with questions. Did Judge Boyd lock up a sick man? Was this an overreaction? But the truth has a funny way of surfacing in my court. At 2:15 p.m., pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act and in the interest of public transparency, I authorized the release of the courtroom security footage. We didn't edit it. We didn't add commentary. We just released the raw, high-definition video of the entire hearing. The effect was instantaneous and nuclear. Within 20 minutes, the video had 1 million views. The public didn't see a medical episode. They didn't see a tired public servant fainting from low blood sugar. They saw a bully. They saw Marcus Sterling mocking a crying single mother. They heard the audio of his threats. They saw him shove a uniformed officer. And then, in glorious 4K resolution, they saw him launch himself over a table like a rabid animal, claws out, aiming for a sitting judge. And they saw the takedown. Officer Thompson became a national hero overnight. The image of him intercepting the mayor midair became an instant meme. The internet did what the internet does best. It stripped Sterling of his dignity. The king of Silver Creek wasn't feared anymore. He was being laughed at by millions of people. I watched the news coverage from my chambers. The anchors weren't talking about his medical condition anymore. They were using words like unhinged, dangerous, and unfit for office. The governor released a statement at 3 p.m. condemning the violence and calling for Sterling's immediate resignation. The city council, usually Sterling's puppets, announced an emergency session to discuss impeachment. In the span of 4 hours, Marcus Sterling had lost the court of law, and he had been obliterated in the court of public opinion. He walked into my courtroom a political titan. By the time the evening news aired, he was a national punchline. Down in the holding cell, Sterling didn't know about the video yet. He didn't know that his medical defense had been blown to pieces by his own actions. He was still pacing, still demanding his phone, still believing that he could spin his way out of this. He was about to get a visitor who would shatter that illusion once and for all. The holding cell has a way of distorting time. For Marcus Sterling, 3 hours felt like 3 decades. He had paced the length of the cell exactly 400 times. He had rehearsed his speech to the media, a speech about stress, overwork, and a momentary lapse in judgment. He still believed, deep down in that reptilian brain of his, that this was just a PR crisis, a bad news cycle. He was waiting for Arthur Blackwood. Blackwood would walk through that door with a bail bondsman and a suppression order, and this nightmare would end. At 4:45 p.m., the heavy steel door finally buzzed and swung open. Sterling jumped up, smoothing his ruined suit. "About damn time, Arthur. Get me out of here. This place smells like—" He stopped. It wasn't Arthur Blackwood standing in the doorway. It was 2 men in cheap suits, but they weren't lawyers. I recognized them immediately when I read the report later. Detectives Miller and Kowalski from the State Police Major Crimes Unit. They didn't look impressed. They looked like 2 sanitation workers ready to take out the trash. "Marcus Sterling?" Detective Miller asked, stepping into the cramped cell. "I am the mayor," Sterling corrected automatically, his chin jutting out. "Where is my attorney? I demand to see Arthur Blackwood immediately." Detective Kowalski smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Mr. Blackwood is unavailable at the moment, Mayor. He's currently across the street in the district attorney's office." "Doing what? Filing for my release?" "No," Miller said, dropping a thick manila folder onto the metal bench with a heavy thud. He's negotiating his immunity deal. The silence that followed was absolute. This is the part of the story I call the betrayal. Men like Sterling operate on fear and money. They think loyalty is a commodity you can buy, but loyalty bought with money expires the moment the checks stop clearing or the handcuffs come out. Arthur Blackwood, the cleaner, the man who knew where all the bodies were buried, had taken one look at the viral video of his client attacking a judge and decided he didn't want to go down with the ship. Immunity? Sterling whispered. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. Turns out, Kowalski said, leaning against the cinder block wall, Blackwood kept receipts. He has the emails, Marcus, the ones about the zoning bribes, the ones about the kickbacks from the construction company for the mall project, and the ones where you ordered the harassment of Sarah Miller. Sterling sat down heavily on the bench. His legs simply gave out. This is a lie, he stammered, but his eyes were darting around the room, seeing ghosts. Attorney-client privilege does not apply when the attorney is a co-conspirator in an ongoing criminal enterprise, Miller cut in. He gave us the ledger, Marcus. We know about the offshore accounts in the Caymans. We know about the payoffs to the city inspectors. We know everything. This wasn't an interrogation. An interrogation implies questions. This was a demolition. They didn't ask him if he did it. They just listed the crimes. Racketeering, wire fraud, extortion, conspiracy, and now, thanks to his performance in my courtroom, assault on a judicial officer. You're looking at 20 years for the corruption, Miller said, his voice conversational, almost bored. Add another 10 for attacking Judge Boyd. You're 55 years old, Marcus. Do the math. You're going to die in prison. Sterling looked up. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. What was left was a terrified old man realizing he had played a game he didn't understand. I can give you names, Sterling gasped, grasping at straws. I can give you the governor. I can give you the senators. Kowalski laughed. The governor issued a statement an hour ago, calling you a disgrace to public service. You have no friends left, Marcus. You're radioactive. They stood up to leave. We just wanted to let you know we're adding state RICO charges to your sheet, Miller said. Get comfortable. You're being transferred to maximum security at the county jail tonight. No bail. Judge Boyd made sure of that. The door slammed shut. The lock engaged with a final metallic clank. Marcus Sterling was alone again, but this time, the silence wasn't just heavy, it was final. The betrayal was complete. The king had been deposed, not by an army, but by his own hubris and the cowardice of the men he thought he owned. He stared at the blank gray wall, and for the first time, he cried, not crocodile tears for the cameras, real, ugly tears of a man watching his entire existence dissolve. But the worst was yet to come, because tomorrow he wouldn't be facing me. He would be facing the one person he truly couldn't intimidate. There is a ritual in the American justice system known colloquially as the perp walk. Technically, it is just the transfer of a suspect from police custody to a transport vehicle. But symbolically, it is something much more powerful. It is the moment the public gets to see the monster reduced to a man. For Marcus Sterling, this ritual took place at 8 a.m. the next morning. I wasn't there on the sidewalk, but like the rest of the city, I watched it unfold on the monitors in my chambers. The sheriff's department had decided not to use the underground tunnel. They claimed it was a logistical necessity due to maintenance. I suspect, however, that the sheriff, a man Sterling had publicly insulted 2 years ago, decided that a little fresh air would do the mayor some good. The back exit of the courthouse opens onto a secured alleyway, but the fencing is chain link. It offers no privacy. And on that morning, pressed against that fence, were hundreds of people. Reporters, yes, but also the citizens of Silver Creek. The people whose taxes paid for Sterling's lifestyle. The people he had ignored, bullied, and looked down upon. The heavy steel door opened. First came 2 deputies, grim-faced and alert. Then came Marcus Sterling. If you paused the video, you wouldn't recognize him as the man who had strutted into my courtroom 24 hours earlier. The Armani suit was gone, seized as evidence and replaced by a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. The expensive haircut was matted. He hadn't shaved. He looked gray, diminished, like a balloon that had lost its helium. But the most striking detail was the sound. The microphones picked it up clearly. Clink, clink, clink. It was the sound of the leg irons. The man who walked like a king was now shuffling like a toddler, his ankles chained together, his wrists handcuffed to a belly chain. He couldn't wave. He couldn't point. He couldn't check his phone. He was physically restrained by the very state he thought he owned. As he stepped into the light, the crowd erupted. There were no cheers. There was no respect. There was a wave of anger. "Criminal!" Someone shouted. "You belong in there!" yelled another. Flashbulbs popped in a blinding staccato rhythm, capturing his humiliation frame by frame. Sterling tried to keep his head up at first. He tried to muster that old arrogance. But then he saw the crowd. He saw the sheer volume of people who had turned out to witness his fall. And he dropped his head, staring at the pavement, trying to hide his face from the cameras. But he couldn't hide from her. Standing near the gate, flanked by two friends for support, was Sarah Miller. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't holding a sign. She was just watching. She was bearing witness to the death of her fear. As Sterling shuffled toward the armored transport van, he looked up for a split second. His eyes met hers. I wonder what he saw in that moment. Did he see the victim he tried to crush? Or did he see the strength of a woman who refused to break? He looked away quickly, flinching as if he had been burned. The deputies guided him to the back of the van. One of them placed a hand on Sterling's head, not gently, to guide him into the cage. It is a universal gesture of law enforcement, a reminder that your body is no longer your own. The doors slammed shut. The heavy thud echoed off the brick walls of the alley. The engine roared to life, and the van pulled away, carrying the former mayor of Silver Creek to the county jail, where he would be processed as inmate #842, housed in general population, and given a bologna sandwich for dinner. The crowd began to disperse. The cameras were packed away. The show was over. But in my courtroom, the work was just beginning, because locking up a tyrant is only the first step. The next step is ensuring that the system he tried to destroy is strong enough to keep him there. And I had one final order of business to attend to before I closed this file. Justice is rarely swift. It is a slow, grinding machine. But in the case of Marcus Sterling, the machine moved with a relentless efficiency. It took 6 months for the legal dust to settle. 6 months of investigations, plea negotiations, and the systematic dismantling of his corrupt empire. On the 15th of May 2024, Marcus Sterling returned to my courtroom for the final time. The atmosphere was different. The fear that had once suffocated this room was gone. The gallery was packed, not with his sycophants or paid supporters, but with the citizens of Silver Creek. They weren't there to bow to a king. They were there to see a criminal answer for his crimes. Sterling sat at the defense table wearing a beige inmate uniform. He had lost 30 pounds. His hair was gray and thinning. He kept his hands folded on the table, staring at his knuckles. He looked like a ghost haunting his own life. Before I passed sentence, I allowed the victim to speak. Sarah Miller stood up. She didn't look like the terrified woman from November. She stood tall. She walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly at the man who had tried to destroy her family. "For years," she said, her voice clear and steady, "you made me afraid to turn on the lights in my own home. You made me afraid to answer my phone. You thought that because you had power, I didn't matter. You thought I was weak." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But you forgot something, Marcus. You forgot that a mother protecting her children is stronger than any politician protecting his ego. You didn't break me. You only broke yourself." Sterling didn't look up. He couldn't. The shame was a physical weight pushing his head down. When it was time for sentencing, the room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. The cameras were rolling, broadcasting live to the city he used to rule. I opened the file. I looked at the sentencing guidelines. I looked at the plea agreement his new public defender had scrapped together a guilty plea to all charges in exchange for avoiding a life sentence. "Marcus Sterling," I began, "you sat in that chair 6 months ago and told me that people at your level don't answer to people at my level. You claimed ownership of this courthouse because you signed a check. Today, we correct that error." I leaned forward, making sure he heard every syllable. "A badge, a title, a mayoral sash. These are not licenses to abuse. They are burdens of trust. When you use that trust as a weapon against the people you swore to serve, you do not just commit a crime, you commit a betrayal of democracy itself. I picked up my pen. For the counts of racketeering, wire fraud, and corruption, I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison. For the counts of witness intimidation and assault on a judicial officer, I sentence you to 10 years in state prison to be served consecutively. A gasp went through the room. 25 years. You will be eligible for parole when you are 80 years old, I concluded. I suggest you use that time to learn the one lesson you missed in all your years of power. No one is above the law. Sterling closed his eyes. A single tear tracked through the stubble on his cheek. The bailiffs moved in, Officer Thompson leading the way, and gently, without violence, pulled him to his feet. There was no struggle this time, no lunging, no screaming, just the quiet shuffling of a forgotten man walking toward oblivion. As the heavy doors closed behind him for the last time, I looked out at the gallery. I saw Sarah Miller hugging her children. I saw the citizens of Silver Creek breathing a collective sigh of relief. I picked up my gavel. It is a simple piece of wood, but in that moment, it felt heavier than gold. This court is adjourned. The bang of the gavel signaled the end of the era of Marcus Sterling. But the lesson remains. Tyrants may rise, and they may scream, and they may threaten. But in this room, in front of this bench, gravity eventually catches up to everyone.